You know, when you're meeting these entrepreneurs, what's going through your mind?
I would say it is a bit like speed dating.
Have you found yourselves in situations, though, when they're scoring really well on most of them, but there's the personality bit, not sure?
We very much focused on backing founder-led businesses, which is, I think, a very different gig. Frankly, there is still not enough role models for girls growing up saying, well, it's normal for me to be an entrepreneur. We have put it as a fundamental part of our purpose to get more funding to more both female-led and other founders from minority backgrounds.
Welcome to the Wild.
Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurs in the Wild. Very excited today to welcome Daina Spedding, who is investment at an incredible private equity company called BGF. We're going to be talking to her in a few minutes about entrepreneurs and what she sees and thinks about when she meets entrepreneurs. Also, those of you that have seen other episodes of Entrepreneurs in the Wild know that what we're trying to do here is understand more about the mind, the spirit, the weird and the wonderful of the entrepreneur world, to see if are there any traits that are common and consistent, and also maybe we've all got a little bit of the entrepreneur spirit within us. So, hi, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us.
Hi, and thank you for having me.
So, would you just like to say a few words about yourself, your journey so far, and also what you're now doing?
Sure. So, as you said, I'm an investor at BGF. I joined the firm just under 5 years ago, but have been investing for around 13 years, and previously was in consulting. And I guess it's my day job to meet entrepreneurs and figure out, usually quite quickly, can we invest in the businesses they are trying to scale? Does the business model work? Do we think we can back them as a team and founding team? And I love it. It's very exciting, at times really stressful, but yeah, definitely I really enjoy it.
So, you know, like in an interview, you meet somebody, and it is often said that in the first few seconds, you know if they've got the job or not. You know, when you're meeting these entrepreneurs, what's going through your mind when you're meeting an entrepreneur for the first time?
I would say it is a bit like speed dating, and probably not seconds, but I would say first 15 minutes, you get a pretty good feel for the person. And yes, you obviously need to be conscious not to have kind of a bias in terms of, well, do I actually like this person? You need to look at all aspects of, can we make this work? And to be honest, when I usually have probably 30, 45 minutes with that person for the first time, I try to go through 4 almost tick boxes or questions I need to answer to myself. So the first one is very much down to people, as in, can we back this person? BGF only invests as a minority growth investor, so we can't actually control what the business does, and we don't seek board control. So it's very much that we are backing you as an entrepreneur to scale it. So that gut feel in those first 15 minutes, can we back this person? Will we work in a partnership? Is pretty important. But equally, you probably also try to answer the other 3 tick boxes. One is about business model. Is it differentiated? Do they have right to win and kind of exist and create value over longer term? The other one is market. Like, is it a growing market? Is it a sector we want to play in? Yeah. Is it consolidating? Is it growing? Is it local, global? That's kind of another thing which you almost like a hygiene factor. You just want to figure it out. Is it a go or no go? And then the last one, which you get some sense in the first meeting, but usually follow up later, is can you make the numbers work in terms of, is the company growing? Yeah. Are they profitable? Is there a deal to be done? Just at least on a high level, can we make the numbers work? So I guess after every meeting, you kind of almost triage those 4 things and see, can you get the 4 ticks to have the next meeting?
Incredible. And have you found yourselves in situations, though, when you're like, the meeting's gone really well, or it's going really well, they're scoring really well on most of them, but there's the personality bit, not sure. I'm not sure I can. Yeah. So how do you kind of square that away? Sorry, it's a no.
No, I think we are trying, if everything else tick box works and it's just a question mark on person, I think it'd be quite harsh to kind of just rule something out for the first half an hour. Maybe they just had a bad morning and they're a bit like grumpy or something. So I would try not to rule it out after just one conversation. I mean, you obviously you reference people, you check what they have done before, You speak to people, our network. If we were actually progressing, we would do actually proper external management referencing and you check their digital footprint. I mean, I did have actually a case study years ago where they're looking for minority investor, but like business paid very high dividends for themselves. Two founders driving flashy cars, spending lots of time on Instagram. Was very exciting to see their Instagram. And then I was saying, well, good for you guys. Like you're obviously enjoying what you're doing, but can we go in as a kind of institutional minority investor and back you? And when going goes tough, that is, I think, a hard judgment call, which you can't always do it on the first meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'd known that as well. That would have been helpful for me in my, in my journey, the last 25 years. But anyway, so just thinking about the businesses or the teams that you find yourself backing once they pass your process. Are there certain things that you see in those teams over a period of time? I mean, does it change? And also, if I think about how you're working with those people, because I know as a entrepreneur how important freedom, empowerment it is. How do you work with these teams to help bring out the value and their success?
So BGF, we very much focused on backing founder-led businesses, which is, I think, a very different gig to maybe more traditional private equity, where they would have hired CEO and you basically buy from another house who have kind of hired management team to kind of run it. We very much focus on founder-led, and we are often the first institutional capital backing this business. So they often haven't even had a formal board. They have been on this crazy growth journey and firefighting many times and just, I guess, growing team around them. I would say there is a real transition points when we invest. Businesses usually do above probably 5-10 million revenue. And then sometimes they go in much later when they're already at 100. But it's probably very different characteristics getting from kind of 0 to 20 roughly, and then 20 to 100. So I would say when it's 0 to 20, it's most often still founder-led. They might have like very capable CFO or key people around them, but they're still trying to wear lots of hats, doing lots of things. And I think once you are larger, you have capability to bring in much more senior talent and I guess start focusing what you're truly good at, instead of trying to do everything. And I think that journey, and I guess educating and building trustful relationship that founders are not scared of that evolution, because we almost never change CEOs or founding teams as minority growth investors. So what our job is to surround you with talent, or even both exec or non-exec, open doors where appropriate, connect you with like-minded individuals and try to problem solve where appropriate, but we are not here to kind of we don't even have rights to kind of take you out. So it's quite different partnership and working relationship to more traditional private equity where essentially, it's not working, you're out, CEO is in. And that's why I guess lots of entrepreneurs choose BGF and other minority growth investors, because you have to believe that this person or team can make it with the right support around them, instead of having that different mindset, let's monitor for 12, 18 months, see it's working. If not, we'll just like rip it apart. That's just not BGF. And also, it wouldn't be me.
Yeah. I mean, speaking as a sort of entrepreneur, I mean, over the course of the Iris journey, I mean, we're 25 years old now, and obviously we achieved an exit a few years ago. We experiment with all sorts of opportunities over our journey. I mean, we had an angel investor at the start. We had some money from him. No real support, but it was just about having a little bit of cash to enable us to scale quicker. And then further down the track, for some reason, we ended up doing a deal with the bank. So we had the Bank of Scotland as a shareholder for a while, and that was not ideal, as it turned out, but it was a great experience, because also it sort of triggered us becoming more professional. So I think there was good and bad, and then I think we ended up with a minority investor called Meredith, which is a sort of US publisher, and again that was a fairly positive experience. But I can imagine that your proposition it just really does tick a lot of boxes for growth-minded, founder-led. I can just see how that would be an exciting proposition.
Yeah, I guess hopefully, inevitably, any institutional investor, even as BGF, I mean, we are owned by banks, we are FCA regulated.
Yeah.
There's certain loopholes we just have to go through. So corporate governance is pretty key. So when I guess, speak with founders and kind of explain what it actually involves taking money on from BGF or any institutional investor, inevitably it does increase corporate governance. I mean, even, I don't know, anti-money laundering policies, staff training, just basics. But it's almost, I think, a good way which should benefit business as long as you don't go too far the other way where it just becomes very bureaucratic and you do it for the sake of board reporting. I'm always big supporter of when we discuss, well, what should go in a board pack. I want that to be almost a tool which management uses for decision making and hopefully pulls the KPIs.
Totally agree.
Which they will be looking at anyway, instead of writing kind of paper for sake of board.
Yeah.
And then it's just like that, like it's sunk cost and the time commitment to just do that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I have seen that like over the years where board meetings are utterly pointless, sort of rather flimsy status sort of thing. And I think to have real clarity of purpose around what a board is and what a board meeting is for.
Yeah.
And I can see how, the process of investment actually sharpens up the mind and sharpens up the people involved so that they're much more aware, of their commitments and accountabilities.
Yeah. And also I think increasingly what I see is that companies try to separate just almost hygiene monthly financial reporting from actually strategic discussion. So you either have sometimes two board backs, so you just actually publish monthly financials, and if board members have questions, they can ask questions, but you don't spend 2 hours going through like P&L line by line, instead of actually discussing, well, what really matters, where we want to get like next few months, what are the priorities. I think that's what boards should focus on. Obviously, if you go in crisis mode and, I don't know, companies running out of cash or something goes really wrong, you have no choice and you need to kind of scale back and just focus on basics, as in how do we pay the next month's payroll. But in normal times, it's absolutely, I think, so many boards I have seen get drowned in details and almost like everyday matters instead of focusing on kind of long-term value creation and discussing matters which almost entrepreneurs have no time to even think about because they're constantly in the middle of it, trying to scale.
So, when you're looking at a team just before an investment and you'll do some sort of analysis, maybe some psychometric analysis, something like that. Are there any things that just crop up consistently in that you see in the more successful teams?
I think few basics. I would say one is ambition to grow.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you look at which businesses get actually funding, it is very hard to back a lifestyle business where somebody is doing it, having kind of might have a good lifestyle, but have no ambition to kind of scale. And it's not to say that you need to kind of have ambition to take over the world and kind of build a unicorn, but there definitely needs to be some kind of ambition to scale in a professional manner, create shareholder value, and makes a business which is doing really something special on a larger scale. So that ambition, I would say, is first, like probably something which we look for. And then I would say, second of all, probably is resilience, because like as a kind of a scale-up investor, as you can imagine, I'm sure you have seen the same. I mean, business plans almost never work out as they have been. It says it works much worse or much better, or maybe you need to shift strategy, but it's very hard to say that, well, you made this plan for 3 years and it's exactly what you do. Inevitably, you need to pivot. And I think world has been such a crazy place last few years. We had, I don't know, COVID and 2 wars now. We had political uncertainty. We had Brexit. And I have actually huge sympathy for founders who have sometimes found it extremely stressful, very lonely actually. And at the same time, when they have taken external money, they have this almost like huge expectations from their own investors to kind of deliver. And you need to be very resilient as a person to be able to cope with the stress. And yes, you can obviously have tools to help you, as in peer network, hopefully decent lifestyle in terms of getting enough sleep and maybe some exercise to cope with it. But If you're not resilient and you just throw like a doll out of the pram in the first hurdle you face, it just will never work.
Yeah.
So I think I would say ambition and resilience is probably two kind of traits we look for most, because I just think you can't build a successful business unless you have that.
Do you know what? That really does ring a bell with me, particularly this sort of, I mean, I've often been described by people I work with as really stubborn.
Okay.
And I'm sort of going, oh, is that a compliment? Thank you. Thank you, I think. But yeah, resilience, I can, just keeping going. I can tell you over the 25 years that, I've been an entrepreneur, mainly it has been successful, but there's been loads of times when it just hasn't. And it's like been terrible and things have been going wrong, and you just have to keep going. And also you have to find a way of projecting like positivity and this sort of sense of, it isn't going well. I'm not going to lie, but we do have a plan and we're going to get out of this.
And also, I actually saw a shocking statistic, I think on LinkedIn a few days ago, where they've done research on kind of early stage founders and startups. And apparently 49% is considering leaving the startup and just giving up and doing something else because it's been so bloody stressful last few years, which I think is a real big issue, because you can have resilience, but current fundraising environment is pretty brutal. Growth is hard across most industries. And it's just generally really hard. So I think we do need to, hopefully the markets are improving, but it really depends on which subsector you play in. But I think it is a big issue that even if you have all the resilience, it's still a really tough gig. And in some ways, I think what I've seen is that you need to have something really to prove, where not the case that, I don't know, you have a trust fund and you have options, you'll try this business. If it doesn't work, you'll flip into something else. Most businesses we back, inevitably, it feels like it's their baby, it's their life. They'll do whatever it takes to make it successful. They might fail in strategies, they might pivot because that's their life. And I think that's how best entrepreneurs succeed. And actually, I read somewhere research where they actually analyzed like very successful large companies who have become unicorns. I think majority of founders actually were born or were scaling businesses not in a country where they were born. Because I think inevitably when you move to a new place, and I guess I resonated because I have been living in 3 countries and moved completely on my own, you always have really something to prove because you kind of want to either fit in. And that drive, it's just, I think it's really interesting how you need to have the drive and really feel like, I need to do this at all costs to kind of make it big.
And I mean, that goes back to what you said about ambition and resilience, isn't it? And I think when you sort of don't have a choice, that really does kind of get the adrenaline going, doesn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, no, exactly.
But also I was wondering, it's interesting to hear you talk about founders and entrepreneurs, and that there's a bigger percentage now thinking, well, maybe I should knock it on the head. I just wonder also if you compare that and contrast to people who are not living in an entrepreneurial environment and they're working for somebody. I just wonder how many people, I wonder how that stat compares, because people who are in a more corporate setting, it's just as tough.
It is. And to be honest, again, another statistic I saw recently is that the turnover of even staff in corporates, and I think many people just fundamentally reevaluated their life choices during COVID, actually what matters to them, in what kind of careers they want to be in. And I actually, even amongst my peer group, I have people who have, do investments for like 10 plus years.
Yes.
And have woken up saying, actually, I don't want to be in that stressful job. I might go into academics or like something completely different. And similarly, across corporate roles, and when I speak to actually HR leaders or even board leaders in terms of how do you motivate and retain talent, I think there's been lots of movement or essentially people leaving jobs and deciding essentially completely to pivot careers to kind of, it's just been really, in some ways fascinating, but in other ways really hard to navigate for anybody, I think, last few years.
Yeah, I also think that, firstly, I think if you're an employer, employing in the similar way that you are doing your due diligence on management teams, looking for ambition and resilience, I sort of think the same traits matter, regardless of whether it's a sort of scale up or it's a more mature business that's already owned by a corporation somewhere. I think those traits are the standout traits that I've always felt. And, in many companies, regardless of your category, whether you're selling a product or you're a tech company or you're a marketing company like we are, that sort of entrepreneurial spirit is just so important as a way of just making you stand out. And because I think people can see and feel the passion, and it makes all the difference.
And I think it's actually wider than passion. Again, all the stats I'm seeing, purpose is so important,
Yes.
and culture and values, like for Gen Zs, millennials, in terms of when they decide what they want to do as they start and kind of even not just start careers, but like evolve and progress. I think purpose is so important because you will never be able to always pay the highest salary. Best people will always get approached by competitors, by external, to try to poach them. And you need to have that purpose where you feel like, well, I want to do this. Yes, I get paid for it, but actually I really care about people I work with. I really care about what this business or organization is trying to build. And that, I think, as the companies scale, usually, I guess the culture starts in founder's head, or essentially their mates, and they're kind of trying to build something exciting. As you scale and you suddenly have like 80, 100 people, it's much harder to kind of elevate it and make sure that you can actually delegate, you can allow other people to call shots, but not to lose that entrepreneurial spirit is quite important. And again, lots of companies, as you know, have gone through severe overhead cuts, headcount reductions over the last few years. And then I guess, how do you motivate people who stay, who do have options, that you are part of something very exciting and growing, even if you are going through the tough times? I think that is, just one of the biggest challenges I've seen recently, which top leadership teams need to solve in terms of how you motivate people, even when the growth is hard, markets are tough, and it just is hard going, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And one of the things that I've always felt that openness to risk, however that manifests itself, is a big part of the entrepreneur thing. They're just a bit more okay about taking risks and putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
And I just think that in bigger companies, it often that gets sort of, worn away, and you find yourself, surrounded by people that is kind of just running the clock down a little bit, and they've been here for quite a long time, and it's more around trying to avoid risk rather than embrace risk.
I think any entrepreneur, in some ways, even personally, I think the steepest learning happens when you are outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And when you're actually trying to do something perhaps you haven't done before, or in a different setting or environment. And yes, you might get it wrong first time around, but unless you're actually being put in that position or have guts to actually go there and take a leap, it's very hard to, I think, build a successful business unless at least people at the top are the driving force behind the whole team and stuff behind them to go for that leaps and learn and test and trial and constantly get out of comfort zone.
Yeah. Cool. So I just want to move on a little bit. And so being a female working in private equity.
Yes.
I would love to know how that feels.
Gosh, it is. I think things are changing, and it's easier now than it was years ago. And I also think it can be actually an advantage because you can differentiate. And when I meet entrepreneurs, everybody is desperate to get more women on their boards. And I do think that the way, it's hard to generalize, but the way women build relationships and kind of, it is a bit different. The whole deal process, I think, is often, it does make a difference. So I would say it is still tough. There is still, I think, barriers you need to kind of leap through. And I think the biggest challenge our industry has is that everybody has woken up that they do want more females in investment teams, and we want to back more female-led companies. But when you look at who really calls the shots and who sits on investment committees, on boards, it is still, diversity is very minimal.
Yeah.
And there are lots of firms I look who have, I think, even BGF, I think 70% of hires across BGF last year were either women from minority backgrounds, and investment teams, it was 50%. And across the firms, everybody, I think at the entry and mid-level, there is much better diversity than there were years ago. But I think we definitely need to get more women at higher levels who can really drive decision-making And if we work together, we can accelerate the change. But that is still a big challenge. And personally, throughout my investment career, I have almost always have to pitch to all white male board investment committee to convince them to invest in this or that business. And sometimes the businesses have majority of target market selling to women, and it's even like a female-led product. And then it is tough to basically have to go through that journey, and you need to have very, very strong resilience and strong conviction to kind of keep going.
We spoke with Annika Bison, who's the marketing director of Samsung.
Okay.
And she was saying that she obviously female in, well, first of all, entertainment and then big technology company. And she was saying she's now sort of reframed all of this in her own mind. So it's more like a special power.
Okay.
Because you stand out and and therefore you've got permission to be different and have a different point of view. And she was sort of describing that in a really positive way about how that can be incredibly impactful.
It is. And to be honest, I have heard it several times from the companies which I have backed, and where BGF, we give an indicative offer term sheet, and they said, well, we have 4 term sheets. We want to work with you because you appear different. Yes, obviously there's lots of benefits which wider BGF can bring, but I do think people buy from people, and who you want to be in a room with for years to come. I think being a female in this industry can be an advantage because you are differentiated, and I think we are bloody good at building relationships.
I was also really interested in, I think there's a stat going around, isn't there, around females and when they pitch for funding and how successful they are relative to males who are pitching for funding. And there's an enormous disparity, isn't there?
Yeah, enormous. I mean, it's still 2-3%. I mean, BGF is probably one of the organizations in UK which are leading the charge, and we are signatories to Investing in Women Code. We have put it as a fundamental part of our purpose to get more funding to both female-led and other founders from minority backgrounds. But it is still a massive issue because, first of all, there is probably not enough companies at the top of the funnel coming through, and you need to, and that's not good enough because you need to actually go and look for them. There's lots of stats say that women are less likely to go and seek funding. They might see it as too risky to give like control away to external investor because they have funded something from like their kitchen table, and they want to kind of keep it safe and scale up. And then frankly, there is still not enough role models for girls growing up saying, well, it's normal for me to be entrepreneur. It's normal for me to be investor director or partner, or essentially go into investment career or go into tech. We just need to, I think, work across all levels to have more role models, to have more females in investment teams so that whoever decides where the funding goes, it's a much more even playing field. And then I think, finally, there is some, industry bias that the majority of at least VC funding goes into tech-enabled or tech businesses. And naturally, we see lots of women founders in healthcare vertical and lots in more creative industries. And we desperately need to get more women in tech field because that's where lots of growth and funding go to.
And just in terms of the process that a female entrepreneur goes through, given it'll be the same as what a male entrepreneur goes through. So are there any sort of changes that kind of are needed in terms of, a pitch and you see Dragon's Den and it's all very kind of, and obviously there are obviously female entrepreneurs involved in Dragon's Den all of the time. But it's like, is there something about pitching and then how those pitches are evaluated by potential investors?
I would say there's nothing wrong with how women pitch. It's more of a industry issue in terms of which businesses all male investment teams are comfortable backing and how they perceive risk.
Yes.
I would say in my personal experience that yes, on average, probably female-led businesses are often asking for slightly less funding and have more prudent forecasts rather than super hockey stick. So when you go through due diligence, it's something you need to just be mindful of. It's quite hard to generalize, but that I have seen on a few occasions. But actually, the hard stats I saw recently is that on average, female-led business would attract less funding, but they would then actually make better return on the fundings they do attract.
Yeah.
And also, I think if you have a female CEO or founder, they are more likely to have diverse teams around them because they don't just recruit women. Inevitably, you have more diversity on key decision-making group or board, which I think leads to better decision-making and better business scale-up. I think it's very hard to say, well, all female teams are better than all male teams. I think what you need is real diversity. And I think it's easier to get the diversity if you have at least, female-led lead or at least one of the key kind of maybe co-founders. Yes, and then also I think another trait I've noticed that women in general feel much more comfortable in terms of one-on-one pitches. And I'm a big believer that rather than, most of what we do, it's not quite like Dragon's Den unless you get to like proper investment committee. It is one-on-one coffee, often in very informal environment where you are just trying to get to know each other. You don't even need to have a formal slide deck. And that, I think, making it very accessible, making it, educating the wider ecosystem. How do you reach these investors? How do you get the intros?
Yeah.
To make it accessible, that it's not the case you need to be brilliant at pitching to like this panel at some random like location and it feels like scary. You can just go and meet somebody for coffee and tell you about your vision and just like be a normal human conversation, which hopefully makes it easier.
Yeah, I can see how opening up the process, having more diversity in the process and how investors make decisions, I think that's a really positive thing. When we did our deal with Meredith, before we accepted that deal, we were actually in a conversation with a big private equity company in the US. I remember being on, I think it was in Park Avenue or somewhere like that, and I guess it was their investment committee, but it was like 30 people.
Wow. Okay.
All male.
Okay.
Well, it was like Dragon's Den, only it was like actual dragons, more like gladiators.
Okay.
And it was like 3 hours, and it was absolutely terrible.
I would hope that the world has moved on since then, but yeah, that's pretty rare, very rare. I would hope that, well, it depends on what stage company you are and what ticket you're looking to raise, but vast majority on the growth stage side, it's absolutely not the case. It's one-on-one, and then maybe you meet wider investment team, but it's much more human and hopefully less scary.
Well, it's just not, and it was, I don't mind that really. I don't mind a good dust up because you need to be able to deal with pressure, don't you? And it goes back to your ambition and resilience point.
Because
from earlier on.
The most funds, maybe not seed stage VC, but at growth stage, founders to actually have objectivity, founders are not allowed to pitch to the LC who make decisions. So you actually need to convince the deal team who will fight your battles. So if you get the deal team to say, well, this is a business I really want to back, I'll get to know you, I'll have your back. It is kind of their job to navigate the investment process and pitch to IC. So that also hopefully removes some of those barriers because you don't need to go and pitch to very formal setting.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I just remember thinking, obviously it wasn't a successful meeting in the end. And I remember thinking, it's just not very efficient. It's like it's like all these people getting a bit stressy with one another. It's like not efficient. But anyway, so I just wonder, given what you're saying around diverse teams and also female entrepreneurs, which I can totally see, and how that can lead to much more successful kind of companies. Do you ever think about pricing and structuring deals in a way that encourages more people like that?
I don't think you would adjust deal structure or price depending on who the founder is. Just wouldn't be appropriate because and similarly, you might have the most amazing female founder. If the business model or numbers don't stack up, you just couldn't get it through. But I do think that what is important is to educate the founder so that they feel comfortable what they get themselves into, because often I do lots of mentoring for female founders, or sometimes I'm in settings where people are trying to raise money for the first time and they ask lots of questions about, different terms in term sheet. And I think what is very important to understand for everybody, but particularly female founders who have not raised money before, is that headline valuation is only one of the few things you need to look at. There is much more important things other than like what it actually means on a downside, median, upside case, what rights the investor is looking for, and the whole structuring. When you get, I guess, several offers, don't focus on headline valuation, focus on actually what it means in terms of actual who gets what in all kinds of scenarios. And usually it's like one simple Excel where you just need to plug the numbers. And if you can't do it yourself, you need to get somebody who can do it for you. So you're super clear. And I think removing some of the jargon or having the right support around you so it doesn't feel scary and you know what you get yourself into is really important. Because in some ways it's a bit like marriage. I think it's almost like not to get married, then get married to the wrong person, then go through a divorce. It just, I think that education piece, and there's lots of accelerators now. There's lots of organizations who are trying to level up the playing field.
Yes.
But it will still take time.
Yeah, my interesting you mentioned marriage. My wife has just become an entrepreneur and it's going really well. And she had quite a few business ideas before she went for this one. So what this sort of thing that you're describing where more careful and considered, more patient. Yeah, I've certainly seen that. And because of that, the business that she has now launched is growing really well and it's immediately making money and is being really successful. But I've also noticed like quite often she'll come into contact with males, either a builder or a landlord or someone like that. And it's just like really embarrassing to listen to this. It's like males that can be terrible and they just don't listen. And they can be really patronizing to females in business.
Yeah, you know, I was one of the judges on Everyone Awards, and you go through these all the case studies and amazing women who have tried to multitask or have successfully multitasked, raised families, looked after sick parents, and I don't know, moved house at the same time as scaling business. And I think it is incredible to hear all these stories. But I think what is also remarkable is that often women feel they can't combine corporate career with managing all that kind of priorities at home. So the reasons I actually launch the business is to be able to have independence and flexibility to combine it with their life needs kind of elsewhere. Yeah. And then when you are actually successful in scaling, then to give that independence up and take the stress of external investment is often a big stumbling block, or where essentially women said, well, no, I launched my business. I would rather earn less money and scale less quickly, but don't lose that independence and ability to still look after my family and kind of manage, than have that big leap of faith to kind of put my destiny in somebody else's hands. So I think, again, educating that, well, there is alternative paths to just giving keys to somebody who can control what you do. There is minority growth path, I think, is really important.
Just thinking about sort of all the entrepreneurs out there who might be listening in. Okay. What are the big tips that that you would want to give them?
I would say be bold. Don't lose that never-ending ambition to go for it. And I would say surround yourself with people who inspire you and help you strive. Because I think world is a quite hard place, and all the crap which is happening, I think it just can be very disheartening at times. Yeah. You need people who can uplift you, who can support you when going gets tough, and who will have your back. Again, it might not even need to be within your business. It might be peer group elsewhere. It might be informal advisors or whatever setting it might be, or even it's family. But I think having people who have your back and help you thrive is so important. Otherwise, it's just I hear it so many times, it can be very lonely and stressful job, because even with your own team, you can't share with them, well, we might run out of cash in 3 months. So it's just really hard to take all that stress in your own shoulders.
So have you got a startup in you? Have you?
No, I am. I think for many years I was considering whether it's a path I want to go for. And I think I concluded that I absolutely love being on an investment side and hopefully doing my bit to help the ecosystem, but not be kind of operator. I have had stints in the kind of operating roles in corporates, but no, I like to be on the investment side.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences. That has been a real pleasure. to hear your voice. And thank you so much for joining us on Entrepreneurs in the Wild. Tune in to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.